Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's webinar entitled Setting a Vision and Defining Success. This webinar is part of the quarterly provider training series brought to you in partnership between the Minnesota Transformation Initiative, or what we call MTI, and Minnesota More. My name is Staci Jones. I'm an associate from the Institute for Community Inclusion at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. And as a reminder, the MTI is made possible by grant funds from the Minnesota Department of Human Services to the Institute on Community Integration at University of Minnesota and Institute for Community Inclusion at University of Massachusetts, Boston. That's a mouthful. The MTI project is designed to provide support and technical assistance and training to organizations as they transform their business models away from subminimum wage certificate usage to models of support that prioritize community and integrated employment. These quarterly webinars are open to all providers and are recorded, and those recordings are available to view on our MTI landing page. And we will drop that link into the chat box today, and it will also be available as a link in this PowerPoint, which will also be made available to everybody that registered for today's webinar. And just as a quick reminder and level set before we get to our guest presenter, the foundation of the technical assistance and the training and the resources for this project come from a comprehensive toolkit developed by research out of UMass Boston called the 10 Essential Elements of Provider Transformation. And if you're not familiar with these elements and would like to read more, you can find the toolkit at act.thinkwork.org, and there's also a hyperlink in this PowerPoint, and we'll also include the link in the chat box below. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's guest presenter. Karen Herman is the Executive Director of Udac Incorporated, a nonprofit organization that supports people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the Duluth area. Karen has extensive experience in program development, group facilitation, process improvement, and nonprofit administration. And for the last several years, Karen has been leading Udac through their own transformation efforts, including their phase out of subminimum wage usage. And it's clear that much of Udac's success in this transformation has been due to Karen's strong leadership and Udac's clear vision of success, which she's going to tell you all about today. We ask that if you have questions throughout the presentation that you just type them into the chat box, and we will make sure to dedicate time at the end of Karen's presentation to take questions. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Karen.
Wonderful. Thank you, Staci. And thank you to the ICI Boston and the ICI at the University of Minnesota for this opportunity. And most importantly, thank you to those of you who have joined this session today. We are going to be talking about vision, and we're going to talk about what a vision is and a little bit about how to develop a vision and the interplay of that. But before we get started, I do want to acknowledge that my colleagues here at Udac who have been instrumental in the work that we're doing and are absolutely amazing in helping us create and chart a path for the future. Most importantly, Ann Dahl, who is our Director of Operations, and Lola Ani, who is our HR person. And I'm pretty confident I'm joined today by Nicole Opland and Casey Lozen, who are two of our early adopters and individuals who will hopefully be on at the end of this to share their perspective. It's much more comprehensive, and without the two of them, we would not have put the building blocks in place 2 years ago. I also would like to acknowledge Udac colleagues Chloe Trolley, Stephanie Davich, Dana Swore, Chris McCord, and Nova Seringi. And they were absolutely instrumental in helping to lead this team. And actually today, it's the reality we're knowing they're leading me. So they're amazing. Thank you. Once again, thank you, Danielle, Staci, Don, and Amy for all of your work and support. It's meant a great deal to Udac. I started with this quote, and people have heard me say this before: if the only color you ever know is gray, white, or black, when you're asked what color you want, you're going to say white, gray, or black. And that is an absolute, that really what we're doing in our transformation is creating opportunity and experiences that haven't existed before. And we're really thinking beyond what today is into what it is we want to create. So creating, the word in there, is really about a mosaic for the future. So next slide, please. So there are 10 essential elements, and Staci outlined those, and we did use them. We had to be reminded a couple of times, but there is a reason why number one is clear and consistent goals, or one would say vision. And that's because vision is about the future and where you're headed. And I want to acknowledge right up front that we do not have all the answers. And if I give that impression, it's totally misleading. We are inventing every single day. And my colleagues will tell you that sometimes we don't even know what the next question is, but that we have faith in what it is we have set as our vision. And we know that we can get there through a collaborative effort. I would also say that transformation is a relentless focus on the future and what it is you want to accomplish. You can't, there is no magic. You absolutely are, have to be relentlessly focused on where it is you're headed, what it's going to take, reallocating resources, asking yourselves really tough questions. And we actually had a pack as we were going through this that we would, every time we said we were going to open up the building and we were going to go back to what we were doing, that somebody on the team had to say, okay, how can we do this in the community? Because you just absolutely have to be relentlessly focused. It's too easy to retreat when you're feeling uncertain or fearful, or any of the many emotions that you feel during the process of making these tremendous changes in an organization. But I would echo what Staci has said, what Don and Danielle told us as we were moving. The path really is these 10 essential elements. And we're going to spend a little time talking about vision and a little bit about communication, but there is a whole area there. So Staci gave this descriptor, and I loved it when I saw it because there were 4 words that jumped at me in the description of what it is she said about creating a vision, clear and consistent goals. And that's transformation, vision, success, and action. And these 4 words are going to be words that stick with you in this entire time. She also says transformation is messy, and I would agree with that, but I would also add that it's energizing, exciting, and inspiring. So next slide. So today I'm going to talk about the role of vision in transformation. I already used the word relentless. You might want to write that down. Define the components of a vision statement. Describe how vision, mission, and values are unique, and yet at the same time how they work together. We're going to talk a lot about leadership, and that doesn't always mean CEO or director or whatever, but leadership is going to come from all levels in your organization, but you do lead. And then we're going to talk a little bit about communication, paths, stakeholder messages, and engagement, and communication as an engagement strategy for transformation. And we'll talk about how we skinned our knees more than once in communication. But next slide, please. Okay, mission, vision, values, they're important. They work together. Every organization has them. And we're going to spend a little time looking at what mission is, what values are, and then what it is vision, because mission and values support that vision as you move forward. And so being clear about what you're talking about and how you're using those are important. Next slide, please. So mission is really about purpose. It's about the present. It's about what you're doing. It's about who you serve, and it's about what makes your organization unique. It should be clear and concise. A lot of times we want to throw alphabet soup and the kitchen sink into the mission statement to make sure we don't miss anything that we're doing. And that's really not necessary. It should be really clear. And if you can't say your mission statement pretty fast, you have some difficulty. So next slide, please. So I took a look at some missions. Mayo Clinic has one, inspiring hope and promoting health through integrated clinical practice, education, and research. Udac's mission is to challenge disability, create opportunity, and cultivate success. GM says we are going to deliver world-class customer experiences at every touch point, and to do so in a foundation of trust and transparency. And Lego says we inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. I love that mission statement. It makes me excited just to even say it. And the mission statement should be really clear about what you do and what it is you are doing. We began our journey in 2018, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but we really needed to update our language more than we did anything. And you may find that as an organization as well, is that updating your language becomes something that you want to do. But we really were building on 50 years of a mission around that when we developed our new statement, which was to challenge disability, create opportunity, and cultivate success. Next slide. Values really set the standards for your organization. Every organization has them, whether they're written or unwritten, actively lived as part of what you do as an organization, or merely written on websites, brochures, or for your grants or in annual reports. But values should be lived, and you should be able to see them and experience them live in your organization. Next slide, please. So here's some values that are by the same four organizations we just looked at. Mayo Clinic says their values are respect, integrity, compassion, healing, teamwork, innovation, and excellence. Udac is service, respect, dedication, leadership, excellence, stewardship, celebration, and teamwork. Each one of these have a definition behind them. GM says to be inclusive, think customer, innovate now, look ahead, one team, be bold, it's on me, and winning with integrity. And they actually call theirs behaviors. And Lego says imagination, creativity, fun, learning, caring, and quality. So you can see how organizations explain the foundations on which they're built by their values. Next slide, please. Okay, so vision. Vision really inspires the future. And that's really what, as you're transforming, that's what you're looking towards, is what are we building towards and what are we doing? And it really should be exciting and invite others to partner with you in achieving that vision. And it's that excitement and inspiration that really leads people to want to help you, and they will. If you have a good vision and you are doing great work, people do want to work with you to make this successful. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at some visions. Mayo Clinic says we're transforming medicine to connect and cure as the global authority in the care of serious or complex diseases. At Udac, we say we're going to create a community where opportunity is accessible to individuals of all abilities, one person, one career, one possibility at a time. And GM has a vision of zero crashes, zero emissions, zero congestion, and we have committed ourselves to leading the way toward this future. And Lego says a global force for learning through play. And when I look at GM's vision, I just think, wow, that is so powerful. Zero crashes, zero emissions, zero congestion. Who would not want to be a part of that as an employee or a partner in a business proposition? At Udac, when we were doing this, we really looked at where are we going towards? And remember, this was 2018 before the pandemic. But we knew that this was about community. We knew that our vision was to be in the community, to make community accessible to all individuals, and to do that in a person-centered way, hence one person, one career, one possibility at a time. And vision really is really about creating where you're headed, and making it so exciting and compelling that people want to be a part of that. So I asked some questions, and I would say these are important questions when you're looking at a vision or developing a vision, and it's what are the organization's dreams and goals, not what you're doing today. What are your dreams and goals? Where do you want to be? What would the world look like if you were successful? And what problems is it that the organization is solving for the greater good? And then finally, who are we inspiring to change over the long term? And that's to engage the employees, to engage colleagues, to engage donors and grantors and philanthropy in helping you achieve missions and visions. Next slide, please. So these three, vision, mission, and values, are so important. The mission is what you do every day. It should be clear and concise. Values are the important beliefs and behaviors that you live. I would, and the vision is really about the future. And you should see those visions that those values lived every day. But more importantly, you should have something that inspires people to move forward with you in your vision. Next slide, please. So develop a compelling vision. How do you do that? Well, first of all, and I put it in there, and I mean this with all sincerity, you have to lead. If you're wishy-washy about transformation, if you don't know where you're going, that's okay, but you do have to lead. And leading is really about you inspiring and engaging and bringing people along in the process. I'm going to combine the next two, which is kind of do your homework and know your field. Why are you transforming, and what is it you're going towards? What's happening in your field, and how can you communicate those messages to people that are out there in listening to what it is you want to do, and how you want to do that includes board members, community members, employees. But know that information and know the subject matter and know who your content experts are and who you can turn to help you with that message. Know your brand and know what it is you represent, and know what it is maybe you're changing and needing to let go of. Because if you can't articulate that, you sometimes get stuck in the today. And then be clear about the fact that you're transforming. So next slide, please. So a vision, John Cotter, who in the 90s did a lot on organizational change and transformation, really says it well when he says a vision says something that clarifies the direction in which an organization needs to move. Udac really was setting a tone in 2018 about the community being the driver, person-centered, and available to people of all abilities. So that's really how we shaped ours. And how we got there was to ask those questions that I talked about a little bit before. But I would say get your group together, get a stakeholder group together, and take a look at variety of opinions and ideas and language, and have them come together in a group. We used individuals who were from all levels of the organization, and I'll come back to that. Next slide, please. So here's some questions, and these are questions that are, I think, important to ask yourself, your groups that you work with. But what would we be doing if time and resources were unlimited? And it helps break away the barriers and the constraints of, well, we can't do that because we don't have money, we don't have time, we don't have resources, we don't have whatever. What is it you would do if all of those things were unlimited? What are the organization's goals and dreams? Sometimes we get so bogged down in the day-to-day that we forget about dreaming about possibilities. So what would those be? And again, ask yourself, what would the world look like if we're successful? What are the problems that the organization is trying to solve? What are we doing today? And I think this is a reflection point that we were doing 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe even 40 years ago, that needs to change. And I am confident we all have them. Every organization does. Would I want to be in this program if I needed these services? And then where do we go? What do we need to let go of to create the future? And then there is an elephant in the room. Next slide, please. There's always an elephant in the room. It's the issues no one wants to talk about. They're usually pretty dang big and everybody knows them, but nobody wants to acknowledge them. But they really are important. And we're going to come back to elephants. So next slide, please. Vision and transformation. I'm going to circle back to Cotter for just a few minutes, because Cotter identifies 8 reasons why transformation efforts fail in his book called Leading Change. I've provided a link to an article from Harvard Business Review that's a quick read. But in this 8 reasons why transformation changes, he identifies number 3 as lacking a vision. And I think that that is really a key component of this, because a vision, where you're headed, creates the compelling statement where all your plans, your directions, directives, your programs will lead. It really shapes how you're going to allocate resources for the future as well. So a vision, and this is really important to remember, a vision really exceeds the concept of a project. Okay, next slide, please. So, and number 3, with lacking a vision, again, vision will focus your resources. Vision will also remove the baggage of yesterday and move you beyond today, because we all like to stay comfortable and safe and warm in the niches that we exist in, because it's familiar. We know how to do it. It doesn't ask us to stretch and grow, but that's what a vision will do for you, is remove those shackles. A vision will also align your employees, the leaders of the organization, your stakeholders and donors behind the work that you're doing. And well-articulated vision excites. Go back to Lego. We are building we are inspiring the builders of tomorrow. That's a fabulous description. So creating vision requires dialogue about what you are creating in the next 5 years. Visions will change. Organizations need to change, so visions change. So this is something that's pushing you out there over the next 5 years, maybe 7 years, but really it's a futuristic type of scenario. If you're looking at it as being a long-term type of scenario, you're probably talking about a mission versus the vision. So next, oh, I do have a quote. If you want to go back for a minute, I have a quote on here that really, for me, represents the difference between a vision and a project and what it is you're doing. And that is that a caterpillar changing to a butterfly is transformation. Peanut butter and jelly and bread is a sandwich. Even if you toast the bread, you still have a sandwich. So really think about transformation as something very dramatic. And a piece of toast or bread to toast is really not dramatic. And who's going to get excited about that? So really shape your vision to be a butterfly. All right, next slide. So this is our vision. I happen to be very partial to our vision because it is about community. It is about individuals, and it is about capturing all opportunities for people, and it is person-centered. So let me see here. This is the opportunity where we had, as I said, we had board members on that were helping us develop our vision. They represented our asset committee, our communications committee. We had new employees who had been there less than 6 months. We had employees that had been there over 25 years on there. We had parents. We had an individual that we were privileged to serve. And it was our board members that actually presented the vision, mission, values to the board at our annual meeting. And in there, our presenters, the board members who were presenting, said that it was really John's addition to the group that gave voice to the importance of our work. He did not hesitate to challenge us, to encourage us, to scold us for missing a point, or to throw out ideas that provided discussion and exploration. And I think that was the most amazing part of it, is every time we think we got it, he's like, who likes that? So it really opened doors for us to see the world in a way that was moving us forward instead of keeping us where we were at. Next slide, please. So I'm going to quote Cotter again, because I think this is really, really important. And he says, whenever smart and well-intentioned people avoid confronting obstacles, they disempower employees and they undermine change. And that's really an important thing to remember, is that you are going to have obstacles, and they do need to be addressed. Next slide, please. So that brings us to the elephant. And the elephant is really, really big. This is an elephant, and they do exist. As I said earlier, there's always an elephant, and most of us do not want to acknowledge those elephants. And the reason we don't want to acknowledge them is because they really are powerful, and they are sometimes seen as barriers, sometimes seen as a void that we don't know how to cross. Udac had several barriers or elephants or things that we really needed to look at. And the first one really was about change had not been successful for our organization. Program change, a consultant, board support, leadership change had not really allowed us to move into a direction that was futuristic. Some of that was because leadership didn't always mean what they said. That implementation and follow through didn't always happen. Employees held great power. And I'm going to say that again, employees held great power. And their power was that if we made them uncomfortable and they didn't like what we were doing, they might quit. And resources were hard to come by, and we did not want them to be uncomfortable. We didn't want to rock the boat. We didn't want to ask more from them. We sometimes had a we-they attitude, we-they versus community versus in the building. And I think we had a lot of fear. We had fear of a role change. We had fear of anger, disgruntlement from parents or guardians. We were fearful that the change might not be successful, that clients might not like what we do, that there was maybe a lack of board support. We had a fear of change. And the list was endless, and acknowledging the list and acknowledging some of those big barriers or those big elephants that sat there in the midst of all of us really gave us an opportunity to plan to address those issues. We also had a big one, and you hear this today, and we talk about it ourselves, and we continue to talk about it, and I hear it across transformation, is that what about the things and the people that get left behind? And what we forget in that conversation is that we're not leaving people behind. We're developing the future that includes them and encompasses them and supports them in new and different ways. But it is a change. We also really had to look at leaders and leadership and the commitment of the leadership team and what it was going to take for us to be on the same page, to bring our board along, to bring our community along, to bring our stakeholders along. And it takes a lot of energy, and I will say skills, to find new ways of working. But when you put those elephants, bring them out from under the table and set them out there for everybody to look at, you can create strategies to really be able to address those elephants. I will add that only you and your team can acknowledge the elephants, that if they're not acknowledged, their power removed, your team will struggle. And sometimes the elephants stay hidden for a really long time until somebody brings them out and says, yeah, we got an elephant here. But you really have to engage in those candid conversations, some of which may be on a one-on-one with individuals who need to come on board with you or who have an issue that they're afraid to raise. But you have to ask for that candid feedback from your team, trusted board members, community stakeholders. And I would also put out there that you need to be prepared to hear sometimes that your position is an elephant, that you are the one that's keeping this from moving forward as the leader of the organization, because you can think of all the reasons why this isn't going to work and what it's going to take and how much effort it's going to be. And I don't say that in any kind of malicious way, because I will tell you every now and then my team would say to me, okay, we can get over this, Karen. So it's time to move on. So be prepared. Sometimes you are the elephant. Next slide, please. I also want to quote John Cotter in saying that never underestimate the magnitude of the forces that reinforce complacency and that help to maintain the status quo. we are all designed to stay where we are, warm and comfortable, as I said before. If your team is committed to the status quo, if you're talking constantly about what you're losing instead of what you're going towards, if you're stuck on the complexity of transformation, that's where you're going to stay, because that's where you're talking about and that's where you're focusing your energy. You really have to be good at transformation to achieve that vision you spend a lot of time setting out there. You have to be relentlessly focused on what it is you need to do to get there and not what it is you're moving away from. You should be moving towards something, not away from something, and that you'll be able to come back and bring all of those things that are important as you move forward. But you can't tackle it all at once. But all I can say is be clear about transformation and be clear about where you're headed, and know that you will eventually be able to expand and grow and do the things that all need to be done, but you have to start someplace and you have to stay focused on the future. Next slide, please. So HBR, Harvard Business Review, Leading Change, Why Transformation Efforts Fail, John Cotter's book. I know you couldn't stand the suspense, so I wrote down all 8 of his for you, so you didn't even have to look it up if you didn't want to. But number 3 we've been talking about, which is the lacking of vision. And so we're all going to go back and create powerful visions, revise our visions if they're not powerful enough. But number 4 is is under communicating the vision by a factor of 10. And I think that's really important. Next slide, please. Because ICI Boston says number 4 is also an area that you have to focus on, which is a strong internal and external communication plan. So we know that there's some really big power around the need to communicate and the need to communicate clearly. So let's turn our attention to communication. Next slide, please. So communication, the subtitle, communicate, 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 communicate. For us, we did. We knew we weren't doing communication well all of the time. Part of it was we didn't really know what to say. We knew we were focused on employment first and competitive integrated employment, and we said that openly. We knew that our community engagement program was around wraparound services because it's all we could tackle at the time. We communicated consistently that we were open and we would expand our opportunities as we were able to expand our resources and our growth. Each team received the same message from leadership, and I am absolutely confident about that because we had a single source that was communicating directly with all of the teams and all of the individuals who had questions about our transformation and the changes in our building, going from building to community. So we know they were hearing consistent messages. And that message was all programs and services are in the community. We also said to them very clearly that we are working with the Institute on Community Integration at the University of Minnesota to achieve excellence in transformation. And we wanted them to know that we weren't just willy-nilly doing things, that we really had experts that were guiding us on this journey to help us do this in the best possible way. And I know one of our messages, and everyone will say it, is that Udac is open, was one of our messages. Next slide. So here's a few tidbits of advice under the communicate, communicate, communicate. You're not going to know everything. So communicate what you know. The previous slide where I talked about it were our messages. UDAC is open. Our community, our programs are in the community now. Those were our messages over and over again. We'll grow and expand as we're able to hire staff and move forward. So communicate what you know. Assure everyone that you will be as transparent and open as possible. And they oftentimes think that you have something hidden or you're not telling them something, but most of the time it's because you're really not sure where you're headed or what the next step might be or where the possibilities are, or you're not ready to go in that direction yet. But assure them that you'll be as transparent as you possibly can be. Share your plans and share that your plans are going to change, because they will. You can't transform with A, B, C, D. It doesn't happen. You might do A, B, move to C, go back to B. You might even repeat a little bit of A before you go to D. So there's a lot that has to move forward, move backwards, and sometimes you revise what it is you think you're going to do because resources and time and things change. For us, we shared that our vision is competitive, integrated employment with complete community programming. Acknowledge the uncertainty, which is sometimes you can't answer all of their questions, but as soon as you know, you'll let them know. And acknowledge the loss and frustration that people are going to experience as they learn how the transformation is impacting them. There is a point in time, as I said, we all want to be safe and warm and comfortable when they're not feeling safe and warm and comfortable. And until they begin to experience the new and have some success in the new, there is that sense of loss that comes with that. And I made a list of folks that are included in that loss, employees, teams, lead agencies, clients, guardians. We had employees that we invited back to be part of our team, very clear about our transformation, and some said up front, knowing where we were headed, that that's not the direction they wanted to go and they didn't want to be a part of our transformation. We had others come on board who began to experience the transformation and said, yeah, no, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, and this isn't what I want to do. And so they elected to make a change as well. Sometimes you just have to spend some time talking to individuals one-on-one, and those are not always really desirable conversations at sometimes, but sometimes you'll be pleasantly surprised. We had a board member whose daughter was joining our organization prior to the pandemic and the close down, and the changes that we were making were not their vision for what their daughter would be doing in the future. And it took a one-on-one conversation about where we were headed, why we were going there, to help him overcome some of his hesitancy around our direction. And we had a mom who I'm going to come back to that invited me for coffee that was not very pleased about the direction we were headed. I will come back to my conversation with her. So next slide, please. Okay. Employees. Employees are key to your communication. They are key to your success. They are your point in the community. They are the ones that teams turn to. Employees are really key to communication. And I will say that there was a point in time when our employees said, we don't know what to say to people anymore. They keep asking us, when is Udac going to open up? When are you going to open your building? When are you going to go back to doing what you're doing? Why aren't you going to do shredding? The quick questions were relentless. So we created organizational talking points, and they focused on community employment. Everyone is included. Resources are driving expansion. Programs will grow and change. Stakeholder groups. We created all kinds of messages around what it is we were doing. Next slide, please. But I will say again, employees are key to your success in communication. Create these talking points and move forward with them. Next slide. So internal and external, communicate, but as importantly, communicate your successes, big and small, and identify those early successes to be able to celebrate and talk about. What we did internally was employees shared their experiences on what was happening as we transitioned into the community, fully into the community, in terms of use of public transportation, use of independence in their employment. The stories were what we began to focus on, and we used those values that we talked about earlier to say, how are we living these values that are examples. So employees would come back with examples with how they could see the values in action. We used feedback from technical assistants, ICI, Don is on, Danielle is on. We would literally at times say, we have no clue if we can keep doing this. This is just overwhelming on many levels. And they would say, keep going, you're doing it right. This is the right thing, that you're doing the right processes. Yes, it is hard, but use the feedback from the organizations. at one point in time, we said, isn't there a path? And they resent us the 10 transformation things because we'd forgotten that there was a path, and that and we just kind of felt like we were moving around. And when Danielle sent it, we were like, oh yeah, we've seen this before. So sometimes you just need to be reminded and prompted, and things introduced at a different point in time when you feel like you can use them. And then we started to celebrate the words of our clients. The individual who, for the very first time, had a performance appraisal on the job. He'd always worked in an enclave, and he was pleasantly surprised when they gave him a raise when they did his performance appraisal. And then repeat your vision to yourselves and to others over and over and over again, because it is your vision that will sustain you when the going gets tough. For our board, I would say they need special attention. And that special attention is really sharing those messages. Our early successes, big and small, sometimes they were really tiny. Your board needs reassurance about what's happening, and that you're confident as the leader of your organization that this is the direction to go, and that it's the right things, and that while things aren't always perfect, that you're continuing to move forward. So make your messages clear, and make sure you take time to share with the board, not just what you're doing, but what the industry is doing, why the changes are happening, what's being shared across not just the state, but the country. And I will say again, remember, your employees are key to your success in communication. Next slide, please. I'm going to say employees are key to your success in communication, because if they're not communicating the right things, it can really backfire. If they say, well, nobody knows what's going on in our organization, we have no clue what direction we're going, that becomes your community message out there. So again, your employees need to have some messages. Write them down, and if you can't identify them, your employees definitely can't identify them. So take some time to develop those messages. Okay, I will say that communication is never enough, no matter how you do it, no matter how many times you say it. We still to this day have people asking us when we're going to open up our building, and part of that is people are uncomfortable with your message because they don't like it. So they keep asking the same questions over and over again, hoping you'll give a different answer. And that's why you need to be really clear about your communication. The other thing that happened for us is that change was happening so fast sometimes that we'd write a newsletter. I have 3 drafts of newsletters that were ready to go out, but everything changed. For whatever reason, it completely changed, and sending out that newsletter would be misleading because we were no longer there. We'd already done something very different. The second part of that is change can happen so slow that you feel like you're saying the same thing over and over again. So why would I want to send out a communication that just says what I said, a week ago, or 3 weeks ago, or 6 weeks ago in some cases? But so those were some of the things that we encountered. There was plenty of opportunity for improvement in our messages. I think we left the same letter up on the website that said we will expand our services and grow as we're able to add additional staff and however our language was out there. And I think it sat up there for probably a good 7 or 8 months, because we just didn't have anything that was that exciting. And quite frankly, we were so busy transforming and working that taking time out to write some things became really onerous for us because we were so busy. Now that's an excuse, and it was really because we didn't know what to say. So I would caution you, we made that mistake, or I made that mistake, that there is plenty of opportunity to get some messages out there. Now what we do is share on our more weekly type of basis what's happening on Facebook, and it's a quicker way to get some things out there. We talk about the success in the community, what's happening, but we have tons of room for improvement, and it's a major part of our next phase is how do we communicate what we're actually doing and tell our stories and what we're doing better and better. Next slide, please. Communication is never enough. I'm going to say that again, but what we found really successful was using the client's words to share our stories and our successes. for an individual who had always worked in an enclave, had never been unsupervised, and I mean never been unsupervised. He was now taking his own transportation to work and being very successful. And he told us one day, I take my own transportation to work. And another day he said, I this is my job, I do my job. You don't do my job, I do my job. So it becomes very rewarding when you start to share the stories and the words of the individual. Barb said to me just the other day, I got the job I always wanted, and she was very excited. And a social worker told us very early on, this is the most independent this individual has ever been, and she has never been able to be successful like this before. As a residential provider said to us, the changes in Pam are unbelievable. She is more responsible, independent, and happy than I have ever seen her. And again, it was related to her, what she was succeeding at in the community environment. Barb again said to me the other day, I miss being at Udac, but I love being in the community. And that's really because she's developing those relationships in a different way in the community. And for an individual that pre-pandemic had a job and was not being real successful, we stepped back, brought him through the Career 101 program. And he said, I know how to be a good employee now. I was not a very good employee before. And some of that is skill development. And some of that is the way in which we did things before in enclaves. Is if they elected not to go to work, they didn't have to. Somebody else filled in for them. And once they become an employee in the community, competitive integrated employment, they have a whole different level of responsibility to that employer and to themselves in their roles. So that it was a steep learning curve for individuals who've been in 14C and or enclave work before. Next slide, please. Communication is never enough. Annette and Judy were on the cover of Impact for the ICI magazine, and they told them, I don't want to be at Udac. I like being here. Again, the transition from building to community has been around community. And we found one of the things we struggled with is we have individuals who've been with us for 50 years and 30 years, and they're really ready for retirement. And believe it or not, our conversation was, gosh, we could open up a senior program here in the building. And then we had to autocorrect and go, wait, if we were retiring into the community and we were members of the community, where would we be going? And so the senior center became a focus for us. And the individuals have become so much a part of that they actually changed their schedule. And Stephanie came back one day and said, the senior center changed their schedule so our clients could continue to participate because that's the days and time that they come. So it's pretty exciting to watch the community respond. Goes back to our vision. Our vision is about a community where everyone has opportunity. Next slide, please. Okay, so share your messages. I'm going to come back to the mom who called me to go to coffee. And I will say again, she was not happy with our changes. In fact, she called me more than once to say just exactly what are you doing to help individuals like my son. I don't see anything happening. And we went through the messages. We're getting there. We're working to expand what we're doing and making sure we're including everyone. And so I went to coffee with her, expecting the worst. And she sat down and in the course of the conversation, she said, UDAC's programs have changed our lives. This is what I always wanted for Josh, to be part of the community. I never thought it would happen. He is going to work by himself. He is so happy. I am so happy. And it was a very powerful moment for me because she is a fabulous person. She'd been a previous board member and she was not happy with what was happening. But when she saw what Josh was experiencing and what he was being successful at, she is our strongest spokesperson for changing and transforming. And we had a sister who was very protective of her brother, who she did not ever let go unattended. And she said, one day to Casey, I needed to let Rodney have these opportunities. I was scared. I've protected him his whole life. He is so happy. He deserves the right to try new things, and he is being successful. I had to let go. And Casey did the same thing. Oh my God, why weren't we doing these things before? I'm getting ahead of myself. But next slide, please. So this is a link, and this will be the Olmsted 14C transition panel that was pulled together here not too long ago in the last month. And Joanne, Josh's mom, and Josh were a part of that panel. So if you want to see the link yourself, you can. But in that particular video, they were asked about barriers. And Joanne, again, the woman who took me to coffee, who didn't like our programs, who's now pretty excited, when they asked about barriers to transitioning from 14C to competitive integrated employment, she said, if I were honest about barriers and he could speak, he would probably tell you I was the biggest barrier. And she's very sincere about that. This experience and this transformation and the transformation of our roles and our jobs and what we're doing at Udac is very, very different than what it is we were doing in the past. And it has transformed people's lives. Next slide, please. So this is Casey, and this is what Casey said when we were visiting one day. Casey has been with us over 20 years. She started when she was 10. She's quite young. And she said, she came in one day and she is, she's very dramatic and exciting and fun to be around. And she said, why did we not help people experience these opportunities in their communities before? This is the way we should have always been providing services. And Casey was one of our employees who, when we were opening back up, transforming our services, she's one of the first ones invited back. And she said to us, so you want us to do what? And we said, we're going to transform, we're going to transfer and transform and move all of our services into the community. And she said, okay, this is never going to work, but okay. And we literally handed her a blank sheet of paper and said, help us create the future. And she has done an amazing job. And Casey today is one of our greatest spokespersons as well in terms of what she has seen and experienced personally in the lives of the individuals we're privileged to serve and what it is they are able to accomplish. Next slide, please. So Staci provided the discussion, the description for our program today. It's a fabulous description. I highlighted 4 words: transformation, vision, success, and action. And I would say that those 4 words are absolutely key, because you cannot have transformation. Let me rephrase that. Transformation requires vision, and success requires action. So if you remember those 4 words from this presentation today, you'll be successful. And I couldn't help but share Lake Superior's beautiful transformation as we're in the midst of the movement from fall into winter, and the tremendous changes that will happen up here in the Northland. And then finally, last slide, please. I will summarize the objectives that we reviewed. We're going to understand the role of transformation, define the components of a vision statement, describe how mission, vision, values are unique and how they work together, define the role of the leader in defining the vision, and most importantly, championing the transformation, and then communication. You can't communicate enough. Next slide, please. I do want to acknowledge and say there are resources, but I want to acknowledge Staci and Amy from the ICI Boston, and Don from Strengths at Work, and Danielle at the University of Minnesota. They were instrumental. They are instrumental in where we're headed and how we continue to expand what we do and develop excellence in our programming. And I want to once again acknowledge my career coaches, career and life coach managers, and my career and life coaches here at Udac. They are absolutely making miracles happen with the people we're privileged to serve. And I cannot go without acknowledging my Moore Region 2 colleagues up here who we challenge each other, talk about what's happening, and together have identified how challenging it is for transformation to occur. And my UDAC board of directors, they believe in us, and they absolutely are 100% supportive of what it is we're doing. So I'll leave you with my quote. If the only colors you ever know are white, gray, and black, when you're asked what color you want, you're going to say white, gray, or black. So you and transformation, you and your organization are moving from that white, gray, or black into this mosaic of colors, the rainbow that exists. You're creating the future, and you're transforming to a world of possibilities that is very different than what's in a building, and is open to what it is we're creating for the future. So I want to thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit about the UDAC journey. UDAC employees are creating, innovating, and developing the programs in their community. And I would say, and I'm confident you will hear from them, that transformation is exciting for the whole organization. We have every level involved in what it is we're creating and where it is we're headed. So go out there, create. And I want to say thank you for the privilege to share with you this journey that we're on. We will continue on, and thank you for your time. All right, Staci.
Karen, thank you for that wonderful presentation. Let's take a minute and see if participants have questions for Karen. And if you do, if you could please go ahead and type in the chat box. And while we queue up any questions, I just want to share this final piece of information looking ahead to next year. The next MTI quarterly training will be on February 16th from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Central Time. The topic is to be determined, but I also wanted to point out the web address for the MTI landing page. Again, if you access, you can go to this website and you can see a little bit more about the MTI project. You can get recorded trainings and registration links for upcoming trainings, as well as resources. So we hope that you check that out. Still checking for any questions.
Also, if it's easier than typing in chat, people can also click raise hand, and then we can unmute you and you can talk rather than type.
We have a question in chat. It says, how have you been able to meet the needs of people who have behavioral challenges or significant medical needs?
It's a great question. And underneath that question is probably the elephant in the room, which is, what are you doing for the most complex individuals that are part of your programs? I would say that what we're seeing as we move people into the community is that some of those behaviors actually are being extinguished. I think you will find both parents, guardians, and residential providers oftentimes saying that the things that they saw before, they're not seeing today. So we work with the behaviors in the community the same way we did in the building. Without all the stimulation that existed in the building, we were bringing up to 120 people into our building a day with another 30 or so staff. And that's a lot of activity and a lot of stimulation going on. So we're actually working with them in the community in the same way we would in the building. And we're seeing some pretty great success. To answer your question on the medically, much more medically fragile, we haven't gotten there yet. our program's focus has been on employment and wraparound services. And as with everyone, we can't expand fast enough to be able to get employees in to be able to go to the next step. But when you look at our vision, it is about people for all abilities, and we'll get there. We can't get there fast enough. We know that. And so we will continue to address those as we move forward.
There's another question, Karen. Thank you, Karen, for the beautiful presentation and words of wisdom. What advice do you have for an employee that sees their company and or senior leadership stuck in the mindset of white/gray/black, not looking towards the future and a vision of change?
I don't know if my colleagues are on here. And Casey, Nicole, are you guys? I can't see who's all on here. That's, you know, that's tough because you're talking about leadership, and I alluded to leadership as being really key to transformation. But I think that falls for me under those. It's time for a one-on-one conversation, and that conversation is really how can we move forward together, and to find ourselves looking at a rainbow or looking at a mosaic or looking to the future, and go back to those questions that I outlined before. Is what would the world look like if resources were unlimited? And see if that can help a conversation about creating the future, because you're not going to tackle all of this stuff at once, just like you can't tackle expanding your services as broadly as you possibly can and create a net that captures everyone. You have to start somewhere. So I think that's what I would say is it's the same with board members who are stuck and who are leaders of your organization. It takes those opportunities to sit down and have conversations on a one-on-one and really talk about what is possible, and what is happening in the field. What are the content experts? What are the people that are doing the research, the ICIs? What's the Olmstead Act say? Where's the language of legislation that's happening that's really looking at the future and how we move forward? And quite frankly, community is where we all want to be. None of us want to be in a building. We heard that a lot is, oh, it's just, gosh, they're going to miss their building. No, they've seen opportunities that are beyond the building now, and it's a pretty amazing thing.
And Karen, Nicole is on and has her hand up, so I'll unmute her so she can also share. All right, Nicole. Oh, you were on mute though.
Unmute.
There we go.
And everyone, hi. I'm Nicole Blind. I am one of the staff members who, along with Casey Lozen, came back. We're one of the first people back. And I would agree with what Karen said. Really, communication was key. And we were also able to have time and opportunity to communicate with each other and push each other along. And we were able to challenge each other's point of views. But Tracy, I wanted to answer your question of how do you manage with workforce shortage, especially an individual with needs one-on-one support? Well, we've done that with a lot of communication with the team members. We do support people here at Udac who use one-on-one support. And what we have been able to do is we realized that historically we thought that for this one individual, they needed specialized training and, you know, behavioral training and this and that. And it kind of just happened by accident where there needed to be a switch up of staff, and there became the realization of that anybody could work with this person. And that really opened our eyes that we were looking at supporting people differently, and we needed to change that anybody can work with anybody. So what we do is we really pull together as a team to support people in those one-on-one cases. And so therefore we have everybody who knows how to work with our one individual who knows how, or who does need that kind of support.
I see that Anne from Udac shared in the chat, I think in response to the question, a couple questions back about what to do if leadership isn't necessarily on board with change. And Anne said to continue to bring education forward and when working with individuals, make changes you can make in the position you are in. And then there's another question also about the one-to-one to support, maybe following up from what Nicole was just saying. How many placements have you secured in the community for people who need one-to-one support while working?
Well, the way that we now use our services, all of the people that we support for the used one-on-one support services. The one person that we did historically just have one-to-one, he has been employed for over 8 months and he is a very valued member. The others, I would say we are at probably, gosh, maybe 17. Oh, Anne just wrote 62. So there you go. Thank you, Anne.
And Anne also has her hand up, so I'm gonna unmute her. So Anne, you are on mute. There you go. You should be able to talk now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I couldn't figure out how to unmute. That's why I started away. I just wanted to weigh in, especially to that person that says if your leadership is kind of stuck. From my experience, I worked under leadership that were stuck. And it really takes a lot to get them unstuck, but you do need to just continue educating people, especially your leadership, and bring valuable and valid articles forward from some of the places that you've heard today, so that it's not just you talking, it's the experts in the field. Particularly, DHS, they have lots of trainings on. They have lots of informations online. So I think educating and really try and make as many changes as you can. You don't have to do it all at once. Do it small, incrementally, if that's all you can do. We did have benefit of COVID shutting us down. So we changed quickly, but you don't necessarily have to change quickly. Change what you can and really celebrate the successes. And yes, we do have 62 people that are either in employment search or are actually placed. We have, I believe, 50 people that are currently working. So that's what I had to say. I don't know how to unmute.
Karen, I don't think your email address was included in the presentation. Are you willing to share your contact information?
Absolutely.
For anybody that might have any follow-up questions after this presentation?
Yes, please. I'll give it to you verbally. And if somebody wants to put it in the chat, that's great. But it's very simple. It's kherman@udac.org.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Okay, I don't see any more questions. We want to thank you, Karen. Thank you to Nicole and Anne and to Udac for sharing their story about transformation and supporting this vision for transformation. We appreciate your time today, and we hope to see you all back in the new year for our next quarterly presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for your attention. Please don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of assistance. But thank you.